Yeah, so we've been in this series with Nehemiah as we think about us as a young church, a KB church, in that sense, we're a church plant where we're just getting started. So we've been going through the book of Nehemiah because Nehemiah is all about how to begin to build something, to do something for the Lord. And so we looked at Nehemiah as he begins personally, he begins with prayer. He hears about the trouble in Jerusalem, the need, his heart is moved, and he begins to pray. He says, Lord, what can I do? How can I help? Show me the way. He begins to organize his resources. He's figuring out what he needs. He needs the king to send him. He needs the right building materials. He gets on the ground, feet on the ground in Jerusalem. They've arrived safely, and he begins to inspect the walls, where the hang-up's going to be, what's going to happen. And then they go through opposition. For the last several weeks, we've looked at opposition that happens to the work. And so you've got external opposition from these guys called Geshem and Tobiah and Sanballat. They're from around in the area of Jerusalem. Tobiah actually is possibly a Jew as well, who has external, he has connections with the priests. So he's a little bit of an insider at that point. And then last week we looked at Nehemiah as he dealt with internal conflict of the people, as some of the nobles and the officials are actually taking advantage of the moment to make a profit for themselves. And Nehemiah gently and kindly but firmly deals with that and restores harmony to the people so they can keep moving forward with the work. And this week, now, the enemy attacks Nehemiah personally. And I brought a little illustration with me. This is a baseball cap. I used to wear these a lot growing up because I played baseball growing up. And when I don't know if they do this still, I think they do it less. We used to bend the caps and so they'd be nice and round. And I was a pitcher, so I was going through the ball. I put it on, and just you look at the guy who's catching the ball, you look at the target, and you're focused in, and you can't see anything, you can't be distracted, you just focus in. To the point that there was one match, where there was some construction going on to the one side of the pitch. And there was all kinds of excavators, and they're digging and making all sorts of noise, and the parents would say, oh, there's a lot of noise going on. And my dad said to me after the match, were you distracted by the noise? And I was like, what noise? I hadn't even heard. I was so focused in. And that's Nehemiah, this word. He's focused on three really specific things. He's focused and he's zeroed in on them. And actually, the enemy, as they seek to undermine him, to neutralize him as God's leader, they actually fail because he's focused in on the right things. And so the enemy comes in with three different tactics. First, they try and lure him into compromise. They try to lure him into compromise. But they fail because he's focused on the task that God's given him. The second thing they do is they try to intimidate him, to bully him into compromise, but they fail again because he's busy focusing on trusting in God. And the third thing that they do is they try to trick him into compromise, and again they fail because he's focused on the Word of God. So let's look at these two things this morning. In verse 1, Nehemiah notes, the rest of our enemies heard that I had built the wall. There's no breach left in it. Only the gates remain. And so, from Nehemiah's position, they've come through some difficult opposition. They've come through some difficult times. They've overcome external opposition. They've overcome internal conflict. The wall is nearly completed. And Nehemiah has the opportunity to sort of begin to sit back, nearly there. Things are going well. I've come through some hard things. You can start to look around and go, yeah, I've done pretty well. Rest on his laurels today. And friends, the enemy, that's when the enemy loves to strike at us personally. He loves to get us. He loves to neutralize us in that sense. When we have come through some hard things, we've had some success, we begin to think better of ourselves, and we stop looking to the Lord. And Nehemiah doesn't do that. He continues looking to the Lord. But when things are going on, it's always the temptation is that we start looking to ourselves once again, and we stop looking to the Lord. And so Nehemiah says, I had built the wall. It was nearly completed. And Sanballat in verse 2 and Geshem come to him saying, "Come, let us meet together in the plain of Ono." Come, let us meet together. I can't help but hear a little bit of the circa being the card of even. Did God really say, "Come and talk with me"? It would be so bad. The enemy is really good at sounding reasonable. He's persuasive. Come, let us meet together. Don't be so afraid of us. And the devil has all kinds of ways of sounding reasonable and persuasive to us. Observe this. This is your right. Look at what those other people have. They're doing it over there. Why shouldn't I do it? And so the enemy comes to Nehemiah sounding incredibly reasonable. Come, let's talk together. Let's find compromise. The New Testament tells us that the devil is incredibly good at sounding persuasive and reasonable. He says that he masquerades as an angel of light. That means that he appears what the lies that he tells appear to be good, because he is the father of lies. He makes lies sound like truth. It reminds me of the phrase in Lord of the Rings, talking about Strider, who's rough and ready character, he's a bit dangerous, he's actually the king. And they say about him, not all that glitters is gold, and not all that wanders is lost. Not all those who appear dangerous are actually dangerous, they might actually be good. And equally, not all that is gold, not all that glitters is actually gold, it's good, it's valuable. The devil is good. The enemy of God is good at masquerading as an angel of light. But Nehemiah knows better. At the end of verse 2, he says, "But they intended to do me harm." They're attempting to lure him into compromise. They're trying to get him away from the work so that they can get him to compromise on that work. They don't want him to complete the city. They don't want a strong Jerusalem. And in the same way for us, the devil doesn't want strong local churches. He doesn't want strong believers. He doesn't want healthy families. And so he tries to lure us into compromise. Whether that's things in our mind, the battle for the mind, it's not so bad, no one will know. Or whether that's through sin, small things. It was just one look, it was just one taste, it was just one time. But Nehemiah, again, doesn't fall for that because he knows that compromise with the enemy of God always leads to death, always leads to harm. And that's what he says. In a physical sense for us, in a spiritual sense, sometimes in a physical sense as well. They intended me harm in verse 2. And look at what he says in verse 3. He sent messengers down to him saying, "I am doing a great work and I can't come down. Why should the work stop while I live and come down to you?" You see, the real thing that protects him from the lure of the enemy's attempt to lure him into compromise is that he's focused on what God has called him to do. God has called him to build this wall, to restore Jerusalem. And there's a longer-term, big picture plan going on there. And he's focused on it. He says, "No, listen, I don't have time to come down and talk with you. I've got this work that I can call to. The work is sacred here." Nehemiah's focused on that. The author of Hebrews in Hebrews chapter 12 says, "Let us fix our eyes on Jesus." And Jesus himself fixed his eyes on what? On the joy that was set before him. And that allowed him to endure the cross. And so in the same way, we need to keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, fixed on the task that he's called us to, which is the work of the gospel, of becoming mature disciples, and of seeing others become mature disciples, mature followers of Jesus. And so, friends, my question for you this morning, I like asking questions. It helps us to apply this. We can ask, so what? So Nehemiah focused on the work. The thing is that he knew what God had called him to. And we've all been called to something. What have you been called to? What is his call on your life? So often, as believers, we put our trust in Jesus. We start to have a sense of our new identity in him, but we stop short of having a sense of he's got something for me to do. He's put me in the place I am now, where I'm at, in the local church I'm at, and He's got something for me to do. Sometimes we stop at the point of going, well, I show up at church on Sunday and serve coffee. Nothing wrong with that. God has so much more for our lives. He has so much more purpose for us. Can I suggest to you that that individual calling is part of a local body of believers? It's always connected to Matthew 28, the Great Commission. As you go, the assumption is you're all going somewhere. As you go, make disciples, baptizing in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them everything that I taught you. Our individual calling, what He has for you, that purpose, is always connected to seeing people become disciples and become mature disciples. And there's lots of different, it's a hugely varied puzzle, or picture in that sense, because we all have different abilities and different giftings. And so we all have a place, a part to play. This isn't about guilting you into, or you need to be at church more, you need to do more of this and more of that. The Lord knows. He knows how He's gifted you. He knows how He's made you. He knows what season you're in. He knows how much time you have. He knows how much time you need to give your family. And He has something marvelous for you. What has He called you to? If you don't know what that is, if you don't have a sense of what that is, I encourage you to seek Him in that. I was thinking of my sister. I didn't ask her if I could share this. But I remember a couple of years ago, she was in a new place, a new country. I was going, what is it? And at some point there was a verse, a sense of purpose, and it wasn't a specific thing, but it was just a sense of, yes, I'm here. The Lord has ministry for me. He has a task. And there was a sense of purpose there. If you're someone who's with us this morning, perhaps you're watching online, and you wouldn't call yourself a follower of Jesus. Maybe you're interested in who He is. Maybe you're interested in faith. Can I suggest to you that actually only in Jesus will you find that true purpose, that meaning, that fulfillment of life that our culture promises you can't make good of. Only Jesus can do that. Only Jesus can give you a purpose that transcends the here and now, that transcends time and space. If you come from a different religious background, whether that's Hindu or Islam, often the purposes in those religions are based around trying to do enough good things so that you'll be okay in the next life. And Jesus says, no, I've already done everything for you. I've done all of the good stuff. I died on the cross. I purchased you. I've done all of those good things for you so that you can go to heaven. Now, come with alongside me. Be my co-workers. We have an incredible mission in our friendships. Only Jesus can give you that purpose that you're still in your heart as you're looking at. And so let me encourage you, if you don't know Him, look into Him. He's worth the price. The enemy tries to lure Nehemiah into compromise, and he resists because he's focused on the task that God has given him. The second thing, in verse 5, you see that the enemy, 4 times they tried to lure Nehemiah in. On the 5th time, they sent an open letter. Normally letters would have been sealed with plaques, and they've got the seal of the person stamped on it so they know who it belongs to when it's closed, and you know if it's been opened or not. But this is an open letter. We know about open letters in our day and age because they've appeared again online. People write open letters on social media. There's good and bad about that. And the enemies of God, Sanballat, writes an open letter to Nehemiah. He wants everyone to read it because he's starting to put pressure on Nehemiah. He's trying to sway public opinion. He's trying to fuel gossip. And he's actually got some political pressure in there. We see in verse 7, he says, if you don't do what I want, I'll be able to tell the king that you're going to start rebelling. So now he makes it public in a very manipulative way. He's trying to bully, to intimidate Nehemiah into compromise. And here's their accusation in verse 6 and 7. Sorry, verse 7. No, verse 6. It is reported among the nations And Geshem, that's the country. In Geshem, they also are saying that you and the Jews intend to rebel. There was some history here. They rebelled in the past. You intend to rebel. And that's why you are building the wall. Protect yourselves to reinforce Jerusalem. And according to the reports, you, Nehemiah, you want to make yourself king. You've got messianic aspirations with you. In fact, even so much so that you set up prophets to proclaim that there is now a king in Jerusalem and Judah. And then there comes their threat. And now the king, Persia, is going to hear of these things. In other words, he's going to come and force you to stop the work unless you listen to us. And so they're trying to bully him into compromise, into having a discussion with them. Friends, Nehemiah is so focused on the task at hand. And the reality is, when God's people are focused on God's mission, God's enemies, they keep mind-boggling for them. They can't understand. Because it doesn't look like anything that fits into any of their categories when God's people are focused on God's mission. His enemies don't get it. That's what it means for us as a church, as individuals, as disciples, to be countercultural. We live in a broader culture, but our home is not here, it's in heaven. And we look different, we sound different, we talk different, we walk different. And the world around us, they don't get it. They can't understand. And I don't mean that in a mean way. It's just not possible because Jesus is a whole different paradigm. Jesus, in fact, says to the disciples in John, he says, the world is going to hate you because it hated me first. And we shouldn't get into a us versus them mentality, because it's not us versus them. They might hate us, but we are for them. We want them to know the risen Savior, Jesus. I read a great book when I was in college, and the title of it was so provocative. It's called Too Christian, Too Pagan. And the idea of the book was that if we're really following Jesus, if we're right on his heels, keeping in step with the Spirit, we're going to be too Christian, too religious for the religious people, and we're going to be too pagan, too unreligious. Let me say that again. We're going to be too religious for the unreligious people, or we're going to be too unreligious for the religious people. We're going to be too Christian for the pagans and too pagan for the Christians. We won't fit in with either side because we're following Jesus. And that's Nehemiah. He's busy being countercultural. He's so focused in on the task that God has for him. The enemies, they can't get it. And so they can't understand. And so they begin to slander him. They begin to say false things about it. They might have actually believed what they were saying about it. Because as I said, there was a precedent. But he is countercultural. He's consecrated to the task. He and the people who are. And friends, when we follow Jesus' love, it's going to be off-putting to the religious. It's going to be off-putting to those who are out for their own ends. It's going to be off-putting to those who are interested in their agenda. But it's going to be very attractive to those who are honestly seeking and those who are honestly seeking Jesus. I need to be countercultural. And that's why we as a church are at a place where we get honest questions. You have an honest question. Who is Jesus? Why do you believe? Why are you Christian? Yes, honest questions. Come ask those who want to be a place for honest questions. Nehemiah rejects their accusations. In verse 8, he says, no such things as you say have been done. He simply rejects them and moves on. I don't know about you, but when I get accused of stuff, I tend to spend way too much time worrying about it and thinking, how am I going to make sure they don't think badly of me? I want to have a good relationship. And listen, Nehemiah knows he's doing what God's called him to do. And he knows that the enemies of God are not interested in seeing that time. And so he says, I disagree. And that's it. I'm going to get back to it. He doesn't waste time trying to justify himself, not a people pleaser in that sense. When the devil comes at us and accuses us, there are times we don't need to waste time trying to argue him out of it. We can say no and get back to it. But the real reason that he's able to resist their intimidation is found in the end of verse 9. Just another of Nehemiah's fabulously short prayers. But now, O God, strengthen my hands. Friends, the temptation is when we are confronted with human opposition, as Nehemiah was, and it does happen within and without of the church. When we're confronted with human opposition, temptation is always to fight back with human means. But Nehemiah doesn't do that. He resists that. He says, no, I reject your accusations. And he focuses on the work, and he asks God for help. 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 23. That's what Jesus did. Jesus was reviled. He was falsely accused. But he did not revile in return. Instead, he continued trusting himself to the one who judges justly. Keeps going back and says, no, this is what God's called me to do. I don't need to worry about what they're saying, because this is what I know this is the right thing. And so Nehemiah entrusts himself to the one who judges justly. The third tactic, and this is by far the worst, in verse 10. The enemies of God now they've tried to lure him into compromise. They've tried to bully him into it, and now they're going to try and trick him into compromise. And there's a chap called Shemaiah, the son of Deliah, son of Mehetabel, in verse 10. He's a prophet, and he confines himself to his house. Maybe he was sick. Perhaps he was taking some kind of a prophetic action to illustrate what he was about to say to Nehemiah. But Nehemiah comes to Shemaiah, and Shemaiah says, let us meet together in the house of God, within the temple. Let us close the doors of the temple, for they are coming to kill you. They are coming to kill you by night. And so Shemaiah says, listen, they're going to come and kill you. Your life is in danger. Go and hide inside the temple. Take refuge there. And Nehemiah has two answers. Look at in verse 11 and his two statements. He says, what man such as I could go? First he says, should a man such as I run away? We're nearly done. The wall is nearly finished. I'm the leader. If I run away now, all will be lost. His honor is at stake. And so Nehemiah says, no, I need to see it through. I need to finish what I started. But his second question, rhetorical question, is even more telling. What man such as I could go into the temple and live? You see, what Shemaiah was proposing was that for Nehemiah, who is not a priest, to go into the part of the temple to take refuge where only priests were allowed. And so he's playing, and Nehemiah says this later in verse 12, he's playing on Nehemiah's fear to try and lead him into sin. But Nehemiah knows, he knows what's written in the scriptures. He knows these things. And so he says, what man such as I could go into the temple and live? Because people have tried it before and they die. Because it's holy there. The New Testament talks about those who want to twist God's word for their own ends. Romans 16 says that they serve their own appetites, not the Lord Christ. Paul talks about in 1 Timothy 6, those who believe they see godliness, being Christ-like, as a means of gain. Oh, it's terrible. Peter says in 2 Peter chapter 3 that there are those who twist the scriptures to their own destruction. And that's Shemaiah here. He's twisting the scriptures. He's twisting what God has said to try and play on Nehemiah's fear to try and lead him into sin. And friends, the enemy loves to use fear to lead us into sin. He loves to use fear to lead us into sin. In our society, we live in a society that's full of fear. It's the whole tactic of the news, the media. Everyone wants to use fear because it keeps us coming back. It's addicting to us in that sense. What's going to happen? When's lockdown going to end? Are we going to get sick? What's going to happen? And we're crippled by fear. We need to be careful and cautious about some of those things. But the devil loves to use fear to get us into sin. That's what he does with Nehemiah. That's what he does in our life. Can I ask you this question? Where is there fear in your life? Where is there fear in your life? Things that you're afraid of. Are you afraid of the future? Are you afraid of the past? Are you afraid of what others will think? Are you afraid of what your family or your spouse, your children will think? Are you afraid of what might happen at work if this happens? What happens at work when I'm told I have to toe the line for trans rights? And as a believer, I can't do that. What happens? There's fear there. I'm not saying what the answer to that is yet, but there's fear there. The devil wants to use that to lead us away from Jesus. How do we avoid that? Nehemiah has discernment. He knows what the scriptures teach. He knows the holiness, the sacredness of the temple. Colossians chapter 3, verse 16 says, "Let the word of Christ dwell richly in you." Friends, it's not rocket science. We need to know the word. We need to soak it in the broad sense of reading through it, in the specific sense of studying it, devotions. And there's no guilt here. We stop. Sometimes I go a week without doing devotions. Like, no guilt. Just let's pick it back up again. Lord, I miss you. And come back to it. We need to spend time in the scriptures, and we need to be transformed ourselves. That's what Paul says in Romans chapter 12. He says, offer yourselves as living sacrifices. This is your spiritual act of worship. And be transformed. Don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed and renewed so that by testing you can know what is right. We need to be transformed. And the way that we are transformed, it says in verse 1, is that we offer ourselves wholeheartedly to Jesus as a sacrificial offering. We offer ourselves up. And as we offer all of ourselves to Him, He transforms us. What are you holding back from the Lord this morning? What part of your life are you holding back? We've used a picture of a house before. When you become a Christian, you let Him into the house. And so you let Him at first into the, you take Him into the nicest room first, the living room, take Him into the kitchen, and serve Him a meal. And at some point He says, I want to see the cupboard over the stairs. I want to see Him in the loft. Let me in there as well. Shine some light on the dark places of your life. What part of your life have you said to the Lord, hands off? Can I challenge you this morning? We need to give that. Again, if you're a person who's with us this morning and you wouldn't consider yourself a believer, a follower of Jesus, can I suggest to you that Nehemiah knows the truth. He has truth. It's right here in the scriptures. And our society tells you that you have to define your own truth. You need to live your truth. But friends, that's enslavement. To have to define your own truth, to figure out what's true for you and live that out and try and create this whole identity and try and create purpose and satisfaction and meaning for yourself. It's exhausting. And Nehemiah doesn't have that. He knows what's written in the scriptures. He has meaning. He has that sense of purpose. And if you would want that for yourself, truth, to know what is right and wrong, to know what God has for you, you can find that in Jesus. You don't need to invent it for yourself. And so Nehemiah avoids trying to trick him into compromise because he knows the truth. He's focused on the truth, what God has revealed in the scriptures. As we conclude, I just want you to notice very briefly what Nehemiah writes in verses 15 through 19. He says the wall was finished. So the work was finished. We have one chapter, chapter 3, where they start working, and it's a long list of who was working on what. And then we've got 3 chapters of continued opposition, external, internal, personal, and all of a sudden, hey, presto, the work is, the wall's done. And as we're reading through it, we didn't even see it. Can I suggest to you this morning that actually God is faithful as we're wrestling through things. He's faithful that He builds His church. He builds His church. As we keep working away faithfully at it, He in return is faithful. He does build. He will build. There's an undercurrent of fear that runs throughout this passage. Each time, the enemies of God are playing on fear, trying to control the people of God, trying to control Nehemiah through fear. Friends, we need to eradicate fear from our lives. The kind of fear that makes us afraid, not the kind of fear that leaves us in awe of who God is. The kind of fear that the devil uses to control us. And I just want to end with this verse. These verses from Romans chapter 8 and verses 14 through 17. Here's what Paul writes. For all who are led by the Spirit of God are sons of God. For you did not receive the spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you have received the spirit of adoption, sons and daughters, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit Himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. And if we are children, then we are heirs. We have a wonderful legacy waiting for us in heaven. Heirs of God, fellow co-heirs with Christ, provided we suffer with Him in order that we may also be glorified with Him. We are no longer slaves to fear. We are children of God. We're going to stand and we're going to close in song as the musicians come up this morning.